This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit. What do you guys want to talk about?
You know that old phrase, right? You can do everything right, and at the end of the day, you're still wrong. Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize how much validity that one quote has. Not for anything pertaining to pro wrestling, just... Well, you know how I like to break the ice occasionally with these shows. I don't think people care, but... I don't know, it's always interesting to bring up random things that happen throughout the day. Makes it seem like I have some actual real-life stuff happening. Which I do, contrary to what you may see on the channel. Most of it I just kind of keep under the radar, because I figure no one cares, nor do they really need to know. But I reflect back on that phrase every 2 or 3 months. It's kind of true. You try to please everybody and you'll wind up pleasing no one. Don't bend over backwards for people. It's not worth it. It's kind of like Tony Khan's booking with AEW. Maybe he should take note. When you try to please an entire roster of 350-something guys and you give them free reign to do whatever they want, when you try to appeal to the lowest common denominator of your marketed fan base, boy, do you wind up shooting yourself in the foot. You leave a lot of people unsatisfied. And yet here we sit in 2023. We're about midway through the year now. We're 4 years into this AEW experiment, and he still really hasn't learned. The Punk stuff is what I would consider baby steps. Progress. Slow but steady. It's part one of the mass redemption story for him. The EVPs, on the other hand, I'm sure they're bent out of shape about it. And again, who are we trying to appeal in that case? The fragile egos of the EVPs, or the only mega box office draw they've ever had in company history? And a guaranteed ratings booster. We'll bring up more of the Punk stuff in a while because he came up a time or two during that Dynamite program this week. And I had a thing or two to say about that announcement. I'm still kind of stewing on it. Didn't have much to say about the entire show as a whole, which is why this may be a shorter AEW report than normal. I probably only sat through maybe a half hour, 45 minutes altogether with that show on Wednesday. I mean, I watched it on Thursday night like I always do, but yeah, looking back, I probably skipped over about 2/3 of that content. I just wasn't in the mood to be having to sit through garbage, and there was plenty of it this week. Eight days. That is how close we are to salvation. I've still been contemplating doing the countdown clock in the corner, but, quite frankly, I don't have that kind of time to do editing. But my God, man, June 17th. Boy, that date can't come soon enough. Lord knows I could possibly give a fuck about any other AEW dates coming up, but June 17th, that one will be on my mind for the next week, guaranteed. I think it was my only form of sanity in getting through the first 20 minutes of the show. Actually, that's a lie. It's called the gift of fast forwarding. Because you see, when you're a smart man like me and you decide not to watch these shows live, it gives you the opportunity to skip over stuff that you don't really want to see. Take, for example, pretty much anything involving the company mascot. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, all you sane, rational humans out there, you've got to be kidding me. Did Cocaine Tony really book the company mascot in the opening segment on Dynamite again? Yep, pretty much. Pretty much. It's, I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point. I really don't. I've gone through so many stages of thought whenever this douchebag shows up on my TV screen. I used to get pissed. Then I became passively amused. Now I'm just sort of numb to it. It's not even really anything I react to anymore. As soon as I hear the piano melody kick in, or I even hear the mere mention of the guy's name, I don't even hesitate. I just skip right along with the program. Because it's not even worth getting mad over anymore. It's Tony's favorite play toy getting forced onto the program because Tony likes him, and that's it. There's really no logic to it beyond that. Regardless of the statistics, the fact that this guy is not a ratings draw, that he doesn't bring in new eyeballs to the product, that he doesn't generate attention from the current fans, outside the marks that are already invested in the gimmick, none of that matters. Tony likes him, therefore, he's going to be on the show every fucking week. And we're going to like the taste of it. And meanwhile, the talents that should really be getting screen time right now, the Powerhouse Hobbses, the FTRs, the Ricky Starks of the world, Lord knows we ever get to see those fucking guys wrestle more than once every 4 or 5 months. But Orange fucking Cassidy, dude. That guy will be working matches on the show every week until the day he winds up poisoning Tony Khan's lunch. And even so, it's probably written into his will that Orange Cassidy will need to wrestle on the show every week regardless. My God. So after about 20 minutes of the denim douchebag, I actually began watching right at the point where they were airing the video package for the Bryan Danielson-Kazuchika Okada match that will now be happening at Forbidden Door. And if you caught the tail end of my Monday show, where I just randomly decided to pull up the wiki page for that card because I literally had no idea when that show was even happening, sure enough, on the card lineup, there was a random Bryan Danielson-Kazuchika Okada match announced. And naturally, my reaction was, what? When in the fuck did that happen? Then I joked about how it was probably one of those bullshit, you have to watch New Japan arguments. Well, it turns out that's exactly what it was. Danielson laid out the challenge to Okada on some random pre-tape they aired on one of those New Japan Strong TV shows or whatever. I think it's the one that airs here in the States. And, that's how the match became official. And, well, for one, if you happen to watch my G1 Climax review I did a couple years ago, you'll know that my opinion on Okada is controversial, to say the least. Out of most of the New Japan guys I've watched throughout my life, Okada is one of those guys that I've kind of been torn on for a very long time. I've seen some really good Okada matches in New Japan, and I've seen some really bland, boring, and quite frankly, bad Okada matches in New Japan. I guess you can say it kind of depends on the dance partner he's working with. The one thing I've always resented about the way they used to book Okada is that it always seemed like they were out to make the guy New Japan's John Cena, bending over backwards to force the guy into top spots, always putting him over no matter what, making everything somehow tie back to him in one way or another. I mean, when I was heavily invested in the New Japan scene about 8 or 9 years ago, Okada was still being booked on the top of the card back then. And since I kind of stopped paying attention to the product in the last couple years, doesn't seem like all that much has changed. It's sort of the same old shit when it comes to the running gag of Law Okada wins. And I'm sort of worried right now this might end up being another one of those cases. Like, if they're booking Danielson versus Okada at the Forbidden Door show, somebody's going to have to take the fall in that match. Unless they do some kind of draw, which, I mean, it's entirely possible they could. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not improbable. But if they're planning on having a decisive winner in that match, is New Japan's office going to be content with Okada doing a job to Danielson on an AEW pay-per-view? Or is that going to be another one of those political game cases like last year where it was a constant battle of figuring out which AEW and New Japan guy was permitted to take falls? I mean, last year, I think Okada was wedged into one of those multi-man matches, if I'm not mistaken. And as far as I know, I don't think he ever took the fall. You know, here it's a little bit of a different case because it's a one-on-one match. It's definitely an intriguing match, I'll say that. If it removes Danielson from all the BCC rubbish and gives him a chance to be a standalone wrestler, I'm all for that. The problem then is going to come with determining whether or not New Japan management is going to be all right with Okada losing to Danielson. Whether or not it's clean, it doesn't really matter. A fall's a fall. And we all know how overprotective that company's been with Okada over the last decade. And that's what I'm afraid of. I mean, I guess we can talk more about that as we edge closer to the pay-per-view. And by the way, that entire discussion was pretty much utilized as a substitution segment so that I did not have to talk about this Best Friends versus BCC six-man. Tell you this much. Orange Cassidy's music is enough to be an immediate turnoff for me. As soon as I even see the visual of Chucky Fucky Finster on my TV, I have to withhold my gag reflexes. Cassidy just gives me gas. Chucklefuck is enough to make my innards start bleeding. It's also not alleviated by anything involving the BCC. They're also not particularly beneficial to my overall health and well-being. Wild Thing. You make my heart bleed. You make everything shitty. I think that's how the lyrics go. Or at least that's what I hear whenever the BCC come out to it. Anyway, can we move on? Let's talk about this next segment. One that left me conflicted, perplexed, frustrated, and surprisingly optimistic by the time it was all over. And while I will do my best to rattle off all the various ways this segment left me conflicted, perplexed, frustrated, and cautiously optimistic, or whatever I said last, surprisingly optimistic, doesn't matter, allow for me to elaborate. MJF comes out to cut a promo. It's every cheap Heat Max promo you've ever heard, dumping on the hometown, burying all the fans, calling everybody a bunch of mouth-breathing incels, saying Colorado is filled with the highest level of scum on the planet, blah, blah. And as he's getting to the point where he's revisiting the talking point of the fact that there is no competition for him in AEW, boom. Here comes Adam Cole. And, well, here's where the confliction part sort of rendered its ugly head. Because I'm not going to shy away from my leaning skepticism over the idea of making Adam Cole the number one contender to the AEW title, especially now. I've sort of been under the impression that ever since Cole came back and did that babyface promo in January this year, it seemed pretty likely that Tony was setting him up for an eventual title match down the road. Only this time he would be doing it as a good guy instead of a bad guy. And as far back as January, I wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. You remember me talking about that segment? I was not pooning on it then. Provided that Cole actually came back with the look of somebody that ought to be pursuing a top belt in a company. I mean, we all know the health complications he's been dealing with over the last year. He's been gone for almost 9 months, had plenty of time to hit the gym and bulk up a bit, do some cardio, some proper dieting, get a tan, look professional and look presentable on camera. Instead, he essentially avoided all of those talking points and validated just about everything that MJF raked him over the coals for here. Aside from the Britt Baker jabs where he was insinuating that she was basically carrying Cole's balls in her purse. Again, something that I don't have proof of, but if my red pill education has taught me anything in the last few years, it is very possible that Britt's probably fucking another dude on the side. I mean, you look at Adam Cole for 2 seconds, nothing about him screams alpha male. I was more so hung up on MJF bringing to light just about everything that I've ever said about Adam Cole in the last year. And again, this is where some of my issues with this segment came to the forefront. Talking about the size issue, talking about the fact that his entire AEW run has been so underwhelming because it's totally apparent that Adam Cole's just given up trying. He's not the same guy he was in NXT or Ring of Honor years ago, and even MJF recognizes that. He's so busy playing video games that he's practically distanced himself from all the hard work he put into this sport. And the entire time he's bringing up all this dirty laundry on TV, I just keep thinking to myself, I mean, he's not entirely wrong. This is shit that I've been saying. It's not really befitting of a heel world champion to be pointing out the obvious flaws in a babyface when they're plain as day. They're staring you right in the face. Things that everybody's been bitching about for months now. And I don't know. I mean, the Jericho feud didn't do Cole any favors. After that abomination of a match they had on that pay-per-view, followed by that really bad mixed tag several days later on Dynamite, all the stuff MJF brought up here about Cole just seemed like really bad timing. I'm not even trying to make it a bad faith argument. It's just, I don't know. I don't think this was the right kind of heat promo for MJF to be doing. Again, it's one thing when a heel goes out there and tries to point out things about the baby faces that are just outright lies. Because at the end of the day, the heels are supposed to lie and cheat. Any sane person watching could hear a bad guy try to belittle or degrade a top babyface, and normally they can see past their bullshit smoke and mirrors. The material MJF was bringing up here was painstakingly obvious. The physique, the video games, the fact that Cole's girlfriend is bigger than he is, the lack of real star appeal that he has in AEW versus his runs in other territories throughout his career. That's the other common complaint that everybody's had about Adam Cole. He's lacked that feel of a real top guy in AEW. As much as that has to do with Tony's shitty booking most of the time, it also has to do with the fact that it's obvious that something is clearly going on with Cole's health. Aside from the concussions, I mean, we all know about that. But there's definitely some underlying issues going on that we're not being told about. And they can keep it under wraps all they want, but news travels fast. And I'll say this right now. I wouldn't be surprised, even within the next year or so, if we start to hear about some other ongoing health complications that Cole's been secretly dealing with. In any case, not trying to get hung up on all that. Then there was Adam Cole's response to all this. And again, the guy can talk his ass off. The one thing Cole's always been a natural at was the promo ability. And him tearing into MJF, talking about how it's funny he likes to bring up Cole's relationship with Britt when the reality is that Max couldn't lock down a girl if his life depended on it. Talks about how this was MJF's opportunity to skewer Cole on the microphone, and all he's done is reference a bunch of insider bullshit from WWE and avoid talking about the real issue at play, the fact that MJF will not fight Cole because he's a coward. He essentially does a nice job in goading Max into accepting a challenge without outright demanding a title match. He just tells MJF to remember this conversation as the day where he recognized that Adam Cole was better than him and he knew it. And right as Cole went to turn his back and leave, MJF spun him around and retorted back that he's not afraid of Adam Cole and he'll fight him any day of the week. And I don't believe they announced a time frame or a date for it, but the match is apparently going to be happening sometime in the distant future. I assume not Forbidden Door, but I don't know. Could be All In at Wembley in August. Could be on TV. This doesn't seem like a program that they would do as a one and done. I mean, they've done that with most of MJF's feuds since he won the AEW title, but this doesn't seem like one of those cases. They could probably milk a program with these guys for a period of time. Maybe it might be in their best interest. And look, obviously there's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of glossing over here. You know, boring you with the details of the promo is kind of superfluous right now. In retrospect, this promo hit home in more ways than one. And this is always going to be one of those cases where if I ever go back and try to reflect on it, there are going to be parts of it that I loved, parts of it that I shook my head at, parts where I just sort of sat there dumbfounded thinking, why is MJF talking about Cole's body? Or why is MJF bringing up the fact that Britt Baker's basically dragging Cole by his nutsack through the mud? Or why is MJF outright name-dropping Vince McMahon and saying that he was right about Cole when he tried to make him Keith Lee's manager and that he would be better slated for that position? There was just, I don't know. There were a lot of dimensions to this promo, but I think when I look back at it, this is going to be another one of those MJF promos that I just really didn't take too kindly to. It was just way too insider baseball. I thought it was way too geared toward the smarts and didn't really do a thorough enough job in establishing a base for why casual fans would even want to see this match. And this is a recurring problem that AEW's always had with promos. They run into this issue so often. The promo content, it's just, so much of it is always about the ooh, gotcha lines, instead of just being about simple and methodical plot development, how to get a story over, how to establish why a good guy and a bad guy are feuding. Tell me about their beef. Why do I care about this match? Why do I want to see these guys touch? I mean, Adam Cole did the bulk of the work in getting me genuinely interested to see the match. All he did was work MJF into a fit of rage by outclassing him on the mic and getting under his skin. And that part I loved. For Max, I don't know. This is another one of those rare misses for him on the stick. I think he went a little too knee-deep into the dirt sheet Reddit ranting here and just didn't keep it basic enough. Maybe that's just me nitpicking, but that's my take. MJF's an old school kind of personality. He doesn't need to go to the well with all the insider terminology. It's just, that's indie mindset. My personal opinion. Now, as far as the actual feud goes, and again, look, I'm going to discount all the Jericho shit. That feud with him and Cole was terrible. It did nobody any favors. That unsanctioned match at the pay-per-view is still one of the worst matches I've seen in the last 10 years, at least. If anybody is capable of refurbishing the damage that Jericho did to Cole, it's MJF. But it's a two-way street. There are things on Cole's end that he's going to need to take ownership of as well. It starts with the mindset, and it works itself up to the body. He needs to get in better ring shape. That's number one priority. He needs to take his body of work seriously. That's what he was preaching here, was that his body of work in this business was paramount. And, you know, maybe for the people that like doing all the Adam Cole Bebe chants and the people that dig the flashy ring entrances and they like the poses, they see it one way. But I've been saying this for a long time now. Once you get past the boom and the hair flipping and all the flim-flamming and the pointing and the ring gestures. When the bell rings, I need to gain the impression that I'm also looking at a physical threat. Adam Cole does not have that look. He's never going to have the body of superstar Billy Graham or Randy Savage or Hulk Hogan or Warrior or Luger. But he doesn't need to. He just needs to look like a professional athlete. He needs to give off the impression that he can believably kick somebody's ass. And not that his girlfriend has to do it for him. That's what I'm saying. When you look at professional wrestlers on television, there's an aura about them that makes them stand out from the pack. When I look at Adam Cole, I see, I don't know, generic guys stocking the shelves at Walmart. It's just, it's one of those visuals. And again, I joked about this in the past, but I'll kind of reiterate the talking point again because I think it's been a while since I brought it up. You know, Brian Last kind of killed the Adam Cole visual for me. Once you see him and you start thinking about all the things that he mentions, the fact that he just doesn't have the look of an athlete, you don't unsee it. And it's unfortunate because until Cole actually starts to bulk up a little bit and change the body definition, this is what I see right now. The way he's presented on camera. And it's hard to unsee that. It's impossible. But again, I understand there's an appeal with him. And there are certain facets where Adam Cole is very talented. He excels in the promo department. In terms of personality on camera, the guy's got that down packed. Like you could tell, he really idolized Shawn Michaels growing up. And that's fine. There are certain elements about Shawn's career that absolutely work. But again, it's the presentation, it's the look. It's the overall package. You gotta look like a freaking athlete when you're on camera. You gotta look like somebody believable. That's all I'm saying. Again, we'll see where it goes. I'm on the fence for the time being, but I reserve the right to change my mind as I see the feud develop. And you know what? For my money, again, I'll say it again. I hope this is not a one and done. I hope they do a long-standing extended program between these guys because I think they could really do some good business together. We'll see how the booking goes, but this is something where they could actually stay on it for a long time, and I think people would stay interested. I really do. It's more appealing on paper than the Four Pillars program, I'll give you that much. So at this point, following that promo segment, pretty much figured we were evidently headed out of the frying pan and right back into the fire again. And boy, was I dead right on that. This next match was a sight to behold. For all the wrong reasons, in fact. It is a completely random tornado tag rolls match with Jungle Boy and Hook teaming up to wrestle two job guys from Los Ingobernales, or whatever Rush's faction is called. One of the guys I know is a former job order dork until they took his mask off. The other guy, I have no idea who he is. Just another one of those interchangeable indie guys under a lucha mask. They all look and wrestle the same, so it's impossible to tell any of them apart. And, well, the match was rotten beyond belief, and it ended with Jungle Boy tapping out the fake luchador with a snare trap. I wrote down, this is now what 1/4 of the former world title challengers is doing. Listen, 2 weeks after semi-maining a pay-per-view for their top belt, he's now having competitive garbage TV matches with two unknown job guys from an underneath faction that nobody gives a shit about. It's astonishing to me how people still think Tony Khan is a competent booker. At this point, I would not only question those people's sanity, I would question their ability to make rational day-to-day choices. Anybody that tries to tell me with a straight face that they actually think Tony Khan is doing a good job as a booker, dude, I wouldn't trust those people as far as I could throw them. It's either weed or mental deficiency. One of the two. Speaking of Tony's booking, well, we now found out what our TV main event will be for the first ever AEW Collision show, June 17th. It will apparently be another fucking six-man tag, because we don't already see enough of those in AEW already. Got to make sure it's a special occasion whenever we break out the trios matches. And the match will consist of the following names: Jay White, Juicy Fruit, and Samoa Joe versus the team of FTR and CM Punk. And I saw them flash that graphic up on screen, and I actually paused it for a minute. And I looked at the screen for a little bit, and I said, not entirely sure what to make of that. Do I argue that they're wasting Punk's return by having him be a part of a random six-man tag? It seems very odd. Him teaming with FTR doesn't seem odd. The opponents are a little suspect. Correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't Jay White and Juicy Fruit still feuding with Ricky Starks? Now, I know they were part of the main event tonight, but wouldn't it have maybe made more sense for Ricky to team with FTR to face those guys instead? Considering the actual finish to the main event, it would probably make some sense. Maybe you find a way to give Ricky his win back. And then there's the Samoa Joe thing, which just seems really out of place in all this. Why is he being thrusted in the middle of this? More frankly, when was the last time we even saw Samoa Joe on television? When did he drop the TNT title? Was it like 2 months ago? Have we seen the guy since? Not that I recall. I mean, I get the eventual game plan for them might be so they could do Joe versus Punk in singles action, but I don't know about all this. I'm not really digging the idea of the six-man doing FTR and Ricky versus Jay White, Juicy Fruit, and some other random heel. Like, that seems a bit more logical. You know, maybe you make that as a selling point for your card opener on the Collision debut, and then make your actual TV main event a CM Punk showcase. Maybe him versus a Powerhouse Hobbs, or a Christian Cage, or a Miro. I don't know. You know, some heel that you can beat, but they don't really lose anything from doing the job. I know beating Hobbs is probably not the most ideal solution, considering how badly they've neutered that guy's booking in the last 3 years, but I'm more so just thinking about a way to give Punk a showcase match. You know, if the idea is that they don't want him to risk getting injured again by working a long match by himself, I mean, I get it. But on the other hand, Punk's a smart worker. Like, he doesn't need to do any crazy bumps or off-the-wall shit to get his matches over. Just the principle of him going out there and selling and fighting from underneath against a mid-card heel, that'd be fine. And that's why I kind of threw Hobbs in there as a suggestion. Him and Punk having a good working relationship together. You know, Hobbs is a great mean, smug heel on camera. Punk would know how to carry that match and make Hobbs look good. It would do something for both parties involved. I don't know. The six-man is just... It's coming off like another one of those hot-shot booking decisions, and I'm already kind of suspicious about how hands-on Tony's going to be with the booking for that new Saturday show. Especially if this was his brainchild. it's questionable, to say the very least. You know, even if Punk had some influence on okaying it or not, we'll see. That's all I can really say at the moment, though. It'd be interesting to learn why this match was booked. Maybe give us a little bit of context instead of just Tony picked up some action figures and thought it would be a good idea. A wet dream match. I mean, we already get enough of those in AEW to begin with. They don't really have a whole lot of time to build up any heat or story with this, so I don't know. Hopefully something comes up. Surely it could be more interesting than having to watch Take a Shit or wrestle. Now that he's a heel, the only thing that made the guy remotely interesting when he was a babyface, the fact that he could do some crowd-pleasing, flashy stuff, well, now he can't do any of that because that would go against his drywall heel personality. So instead, they sent him out there to beat up a job guy, and he won with the running knee in about a minute and a half. Meanwhile, weird flashing images of Kenny Omega and Don Callis were showing up on the Jumbotron, and I have no idea why any of that was happening, nor did I really care. Nor did I care about Donnie Dipshit's incredibly fake scripted promo about Kenny Omega. I have no idea what he said. Something about him knowing the truth when it comes to Omega, to which I snidely noted. So he is gay. No, I'm just joshing. Well, maybe. I don't really know. Maybe he's gay. You can all contemplate that amongst yourselves while I quickly run down this Chris Statlander match. She wrestled Anna Jay for one of the belts. TNT, TBS, USA, Nickelodeon. I can't remember. It's the blue one. Anyway, they wrestled through commercial. I don't know why. It wasn't good for 2 minutes, much less it warranting almost 10. Matt Retard was out there on the floor being obnoxious for like 80% of the match. Complete turn the channel heat that guy has with me. Meanwhile, the girls did some sloppy indie stuff for a while, and then Statlander hit Anna Jay with a horrible-looking clothesline backbreaker combo. I have no idea what the hell that was even supposed to be, but it got zero reaction. And then she kind of just picked up Anna and hit her with a regular tombstone, as opposed to the cradle one she's been doing prior, where she kind of tucks the girl's legs under her arms and then sits down on their shoulders. Maybe she's just going to use the regular tombstone as her new finish instead. Okay. I approve. And then we come to our TV main event. The match that probably should have happened at the Double or Nothing pay-per-view, but for whatever reason did not. God, and after seeing this match, I'm kind of glad it didn't happen at the pay-per-view. It's Ricky Starks versus Jay White. The feud that has been going on since the birth of Christ. Also, the blow-off to said feud did a thorough job telegraphing the finish, considering what they already advertised and promoted for the upcoming Collision show in about a week. But your genius booker didn't think that went over thoroughly enough. And of course, the match is advertised Starks versus White. Regular match. No bells and whistles, no special stipulations, just two guys scheduled to go out there and wrestle a match. So evidently, as one might come to expect, about 99% of the fight happens on the floor, up through pretty much the first half of the match. Jumpstart in the aisleway, followed by a ringside brawl, followed by guys fighting up the aisleway toward the top of the stage, leading to the fight spilling back down to ringside. Apparently there was some invisible barrier that was preventing both guys from getting in the ring at any point. Paul Turner, meanwhile, is just standing there letting it happen. Could have counted to 1,000,000 and neither guy would have been able to beat the count. Made even better by the fact that Through the entirety of the commercial break, I'm watching the picture-in-picture frame, and the fight is still primarily taking place out on the floor. I actually laughed. They cut to commercial with both guys still fighting on the ground. I left the room for about a minute to go refill my water glass, and when I came back into the room and I was looking at the picture, they're still fucking fighting outside. I'm like, okay, so what is it? Do countouts just not exist in this company? Or was there an added stipulation to this match that I completely missed? The part where the ref wasn't supposed to be a complete half-wit. I mean, once both guys brought the fight into the ring, it wasn't a bad match. It was a lot of high-impact big moves. They did like 14 million kickouts and reversals at the end. Ricky Starks was working like he had a chip on his shoulder. They ended up doing a ref bump where Ricky was going for the Rochambeau, but Jay's feet clipped Turner on the way down, so he took a bump and sold for a minute. I believe that amounted to AEW's 43rd consecutive rep bump in the last 40-something odd weeks. Funny, someone was pointing this out. Do you ever notice how we never used to see ref bumps on this show? Now out of the blue, we see them virtually every week. Must be another one of Tony's newest booking quirks. And again, that ref bump was done so that the Ass Boys could hit the ring at the very end and lay out Starks with a 310 to Yuma, which then allowed for White to take advantage and spike Ricky with a Blade Runner for the 3 count. Because, of course, as you would come to expect, this feud would evidently culminate with Ricky doing the job. The babyface down for the count. Did you really expect anything else? I mean, I think by default, I can probably chalk this up to the best match on the show. Mostly in that it was the only match that I watched from start to finish without either leaving the room or skipping outright. Kind of the landscape we're at with AEW right now. Especially with these Dynamite shows where I'm just essentially fast-forwarding through a lot of shit. Because I just can't tolerate any more bad outlaw wrestling. And even this match wasn't blow-away by any stretch. Don't get me wrong. It was just the only fully watchable match on the entire card for me. Everything else sort of rested on the MJF Adam Cole exchange, and not a whole lot else. A little bit of story up here, or a little bit of story follow-up here and there, but not even really much of that. And again, the CM Punk thing has me a little flummoxed right now. The 6-man just seems kind of random and maybe not the best use of Punk's return. You know, I get they threw FTR in there and Joe too, I guess. But I don't really know how White or Juicy fit into all this. I'm hoping they try to spice it up a little bit, but this is kind of where we're at for the time being. Dynamite continues to be a lost cause for me, and I'm just sort of buying my time now and waiting to see how the Saturday Collision show goes. Could really be the make it or break it moment for deciding the future of how I decide to cover AEW content. Do I sit here and continue to wallow in my own self-pity by continuing to suffer through these Dynamite shows every week, or do I give this Collision show a shot and hedge my bets that CM Punk will be the second coming of AEW yet again? I don't entirely know yet. I mean, it only took me about 6 months to give up on the Rampage experiment, but if I know anything about my viewing experience when it comes to AEW in the last 3 or 4 years, you usually don't bet against Punk. Well, the series of shorter programs continue. Had another hour runtime this week for Crockett TV, which evidently meant more stuff we needed to cram in within a shorter time frame. Still did a fine job in doing so, all things considered. The heat for the Bash Tour is still gearing up. Got some big stuff on the horizon as we approach the summer period for 87. And I guess one of those bigger stories came right at the beginning of the program. in the best way they could possibly cover up for it, considering extenuating circumstances, Tony and David are here to inform us that the Rock and Roll Express are the new World Tag Team Champions, having defeated Rick Rude and the Raging Bull in what we were led to believe was a recent TV title match. Although the reality is that if you watch that opening VTR in full, Rick Rude was nowhere to be seen in the frame, and there was never an explicit belt switch, to my knowledge. I think they just did a phantom title switch off camera to where Ricky and Robert just kind of showed up on camera as the new champs, and well, they were very quick to sweep the story under the rug. And again, if you've been following the TV reviews, you would know all about the Rick Rude situation and pretty much everything that led up to Bull's untimely departure shortly thereafter. But now we know the Rock and Roll Express are the new champs. So justice was served in the end, I guess. More to come on that later on. Justice was not served in our opening match for the week, however. The New Breed were in action against Alan Martin and Mike Force. Still, for whatever reason, the studio crowd was super pro New Breed, despite them being heels, I'm pretty sure. And, well, here's pretty much everything I noted about it. Champion and Royal hit a million moves. Tony Schiavone was fixated on Champion's new checker pattern hairdo. Didn't even notice. Champion successfully hit a double axe handle off the top turnbuckle to the floor without nearly crippling himself this time. And then the New Breed won with their crossbody brainbuster combo. That was it. And that took us back to another one of those strange moments in Crockett history. All right. So going back to the rock and roll thing for a minute. The opening VTR had some highlight footage of Manny Fernandez wrestling Morton and Gibson. At the point they were showing the footage, Rick Rude was never actually in the frame. So I had maybe thought this match was probably taped after the Rude departure. Turns out, if I'm not mistaken and I have my timeline right, I think this was old footage of a match that they had aired on NWA Pro from like months ago. Luckily, they managed to find a taping where the Rock and Roll Express had a non-title win over Rude and Bull, so they could sort of bullshit their way through the story here. So they show the match in full with Ricky and Robert making the comeback on Rude and Bull, and Ricky ending up getting the win with the sunset roll from the ring apron. And obviously you had to suspect that something was off here because, again, at no point during the celebration were Ricky and Robert ever presented with the belts. Tony and David just kind of went, "New tag team champs!" And that was their commercial pitch. So, well, in case you're hairy on the details, I'll kind of touch on it briefly. So Rude basically left Crockett Promotions without a notice and took the belt with him. I believe Bull was out the door shortly thereafter. Both of those guys were still the current reigning tag team champions at that point, so Crockett basically had to come up with a BS mechanism to phantom switch the belts onto Ricky and Robert. And I believe this was the way of doing so. It was a messy situation, and I mean, he probably did his best given the current circumstances. It still doesn't really account for whatever the fuck that random Paul Jones segment was last week where Ivan Koloff was out there holding one half of the world tag belts on TV, saying that he was still aligned with Manny, even though Manny was not on the show. I mean, the whole thing was a complete and total disaster. Obviously, Rude is to kind of blame for the whole situation. I mean, you can't really do much about it in hindsight. I don't really know if anything ever came out of the Ivan pairing because Bull was pretty much out the door by the time this clip aired anyway, so they really would not have had a chance to work any tag matches together, at least in my recollection. In any case, this was their given situation, and they tried to make it work. Best I can say about it. But with Ricky and Robert now holding the belts again, that gave Crockett an opportunity to sort of reinvigorate interest in the Rock and Roll Express, who had kind of been sidelined for the better part of 87. Like, they've been on the shows, but haven't really done a whole lot of interest. Aside from a few squashes and promos, they've kind of been an afterthought. So this is probably the best scenario for all parties involved. You know what they say, sometimes things happen at opportune times and they end up working out. And you just make the best out of them. Here they were dealt a shit sandwich and tried to slap on a few pieces of salami to give it some taste. I have no earthly idea where I was going with that analogy, but we'll say it worked. In the meantime, the 1987 Bash Tour is upcoming. I know I've been alluding to it, and we've been waiting for the VTRs to start airing. When are we going to see our first Bash Tour plug? Well, we got one. And the big selling point for the 87 Bash Tour, as one may expect if you know your history, the big promotion of The Match Beyond, which you may better know as War Games, which became a staple piece of wrestling for years and years. That's the idea, Daddy. And here it was simply referred to as The Match Beyond, scheduled for July 4th, with more details ensuing. And I can just hear Dusty dropping that bombshell right now. The Match Beyond, baby. It's going to be live and in living color on July 4th. The Great American Bash, Daddy. The Match Beyond. And I'll talk more in detail once we get closer to the date. From there, we went ahead and pitched back to the ring for the Rock and Roll Express versus Cougar Jay and Randy Barber. And for the record, the Rock and Roll were carrying the World Tag Belts here. At least a version of the belts. Obviously, they could not gain possession of the original ones because Rude and Bull left the company with the belts. So I think they had to artificially derive a new set of belts here. It was very apparent if you knew what the other belts looked like. I'm sure it never even registered with the studio audience. Anyway, Ricky and Robert did all their usual babyface flurry of spots and won with the double drop kick. It was definitely a more lively rock and roll match compared to what we've seen beforehand. Not that Ricky and Robert were phoning it in or anything previously, but it always seemed like something was missing without them being presented as a top team. You know, now that they're sort of wedged back into that spot again, and they come off as bigger deals on camera, so that's a good thing. They also had a quick follow-up promo where they tried to cover the mud tracks of the whole tag title situation. And that was followed with a Jimmy Garvin squash with Terry Jones. This week, Garvin was kind enough to not recklessly drop a guy on the back of his neck and nearly kill him. This time, he just did a body slam or two on Jones and then one with a brainbuster. Meanwhile, Tony was plugging upcoming ticket sales for the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, part of the 87 Bash Tour in July. Oh, how sad. The Civic Arena. Boy, did that date me. Man, I don't even think my brothers went to see any of the Bash Tour shows that year. I know my one brother went to see the one that happened in February that year. That was the spot show with the cage match featuring Bubba and Dusty. Told me about seeing that one live. But I don't think he ever went to any of the Bash Tour events in Pittsburgh. Probably too congested to even want to bother with it. I mean, they did really well with those ticket sales at the gate. Speaking of Big Dust, he was set to square off with Tully Blanchard in Greensboro later in the evening. June 6th is advertised. Winner take all for the $100,000 and the world's television title. And you got JJ and Tully out there trying to hard sell that event, saying Dusty was too scared to even make it to the studio today to confront Tully face to face. And Tully was all fired up here for the promo, talking about how good he feels and he's going to feel even better after he finishes off Dusty's legacy in Greensboro. Says he's taking home the gold, the money, the girl, and the career of Dusty. The legacy, if you will. And, albeit, it was interesting how they sold this match as such a huge deal for, I think what just amounted to one house show main event in Greensboro. Not even originally part of the 87 Bash Tour, but god damn it all, if they didn't sell this like it was the main event of WrestleMania. The goal by the end was, you will be excited to see this match. And you know what I said after Tully finished speaking here? I said, yeah, actually, I'm kind of excited to see this match now. Hopefully we get some footage, because there's a lot at stake there. And that pretty much led us directly to the Midnight Squash with Larry Stevens and Trent Knight. And of course, as a joke, the first thing I wrote down in my notes was, Trent Knight! In all caps. Followed by, he's alive! After seeing him get dropped on the back of his neck by Gorgeous Jimmy the previous week, I thought the guy was being carted off to the morgue, much less being sent out there to wrestle a midnight match a week later. It is entirely possible this was also taped before the Garvin match. Anyway, mostly a Cornette's Corner promo session where he could rip apart the Rock and Roll Express. I believe he called them, quote, two delinquent teenagers that come out looking like they stole their ring gear from Salvation Army. Thought to myself, oh, look at that. Jim Cornette cutting promos on the Beta Bucks long before they ever broke into the business. He had the vision of foresight to see the horrors that awaited him decades later. They used to joke about that on camera back in the day. Now we see those guys actually wrestling on the show, live and in living color. It's amazing. Anyway, so Bobby and Stan toyed with the job guys for a while, as per every midnight match you ever see. There was a funny bit where after Beautiful Bobby dragged the one job guy over, I couldn't tell if it was Trent or Larry, but whichever guy it was that looked like Magnum TA, that guy, he brought him over to the podium so he could have Corny shove a microphone in front of his mouth so he could say hi to his mama. After he got thrown back into the ring and he managed to surprise Stan with a sunset pin attempt, Corny goes, hey, wait a minute. That ain't fair. That guy's actually trying to win. And I just thought, how exactly did Corny think to bring up a genius line like that? As if the job guy went into business for himself and decided, you know, I was told I had to do the job, but fuck, I don't have to adhere to the promoter. I can just go into business for myself and fuck over Stan Lane. Be forever slated for my career. That was such a great one-liner. Elsewise in the match, the Midnights hit a double team move that Corny called the Chiropractor Crunch. Basically, the move was Bobby Eaton doing a running splash and basically landing right on top of the guy's upper neck and back. I simply called the move Scoliosis. And the Midnights won about a minute later with the double flapjack. And then Corny did a very quick promo afterwards, calling the Rock and Roll Express Yellow Belly Cowards, and told them to put their world tag belts up against the Midnight's U.S. tag belts. And there really wasn't much else to that one. Same goes with the Barry Windham promo that followed after the commercial. This was, oh God, poor Barry. I know Barry came into his own a little later on in his career, but I joke about this sometimes, how there are those kinds of promos where guys are basically told to go out there and just say stuff. This is basically one of those Barry Windham promos. He went out there with zero planned material. And I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, maybe he had a thought or two on his mind. No. He had zero. Nothing. Nada. White noise rumbling around upstairs. That's what was going on in Barry's head while he was out there trying to do this promo. He mumbled through some stuff about the Western Heritage States title. I believe he referred to it as, quote, the Western tag title, unquote. And then he referenced Big Bubba Rogers and the other heavyweight title he was after. I still believe in reference to the UWF heavyweight title. Still never mentioned the name of it. Second week in a row for that, by the way. And yeah, this is kind of a blown 30 seconds of television. Barry looked lost at sea out there trying to grasp in the air for words. They were flying by him, and he was trying to put sentences together, and just wasn't happening. God love him, though. And that quickly took us back to the ring for an Arn Anderson squash with Chance McQuaid. And, well, for about the first minute and a half maybe, this was basically every Arn squash you've ever seen. And then came the last 20 seconds. We talked about that Scott Hall squash on Retro Raw where he just went out there and beat the shit out of Jeff Hardy. Looked visibly pissed about something. Here we had a similar situation where Arn wrestled with a chip on his shoulder. Only this time, we knew what the issue was. The issue was Chance McQuaid. Okay, so Arn goes for the gourd buster, and I think it is safe to say good old Chancey did not want to go up for this move. So he just sort of dropped to his knees, and for all intents and purposes, he sandbagged Arn. And Arn took one look at that and said, "That doesn't work for me, brother." So I believe as a shoot, he then hoisted this motherfucker up in the air and dropped him straight down on his head. And it was not a soft landing for Chancey. It was brutal. Straight down on his face. And Arn looked down at him like he was the biggest piece of shit on the planet. And he covered him by pressing his entire hand over his face. More than likely attempting to cut off circulation to his breathing, but maybe he had some pity on him and decided to not kill him in that given moment. Too many eyewitnesses. But yeah, that was a life lesson, people. Don't sandbag the boys. Especially if you're the job guy. Doesn't end well. Just ask Chance McQuaid. So following that bit of unsettling television, we had a pre-taped Dusty promo interview from NWA Pro. He's also feeling good about everything right now, headed into his Greenboro match with Tully. He's feeling good about all the locker room baby faces, and he's also feeling good about making a woman out of Dark Journey. I believe the exact quote was, "I love me some brown sugar." And he also insinuated that he's so amped up for the summer, he could do a backflip if he wanted. And that's when I wrote down, I would have paid triple to buy a ticket just to see Dusty even attempt a backflip. That crazy motherfucker probably would have tried too if he was feeling saucy enough. Anyway, from that point, we had some rapid-fire squashes. Oh, first, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We had a completely pointless Jimmy Garvin promo where he was hyping up the Bash Tour and his also ongoing feud with Ric Flair and the Horsemen. Promised he would become World Heavyweight Champion. Literally nothing else to say about it. At which point we cut to the ring for a fabulous Freebird squash. They wrestled both Thunderfoots and Gladiator number 1. As opposed to Gladiator number 2, I guess. But at least we can now confirm that Thunderfoots 1 and 2, they are not the same person. Still don't know which one's which, but I know one of them was about 2 inches taller than the other. It's the only difference I could spot. Probably one of the more obscure squashes we've seen, at least in terms of the job guys being sent out there. Freebirds were total babyfaces, doing all their flashy offense and strutting around. This did go through a commercial, but it was hilarious because we came back, and the first thing we hear out of David Crockett's mouth, of course with a big old bubbly delivery, Gordy dropping him right on his head. And of course, there, laying in the middle of the ring in a dead man's position, is Thunderfoot. Completely unmoving. I thought, wait, did he actually kill this guy, or did David just need a convincing lead-in? Because I thought the guy was dead for a split second. Turns out he was fine, because the Freebirds kept working him over. And Gordy and Hayes ended up pinning him with some kind of fireman's carry axe handle combo. Don't really know what it was, but it was a move. Follow that with a crazy off-the-wall promo at the booth. I was not able to capture the entirety of the greatness of this promo, but I did note Hayes' line about the fact that there ain't no four-wheel car the Freebirds can't drive, or four-footed horses the Freebirds can't ride. Gordy said that he don't drive no big fancy cars, but he's got 2 feet and 2 fists to pound the you-know-what out of the Horsemen. And, now Buddy Roberts made some reference to Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Birds, saying the Freebirds know just how to be as ruthless as those birds were. To which I asked, so you're going to go into the Omni and start trying to peck at the Horsemen's eyeballs? Sounds horrifying. And deadly. It was a wacky promo. And we go from that to a Vladimir Petrov squash with Gary Phelps. It went 15 seconds, and I wrote, guess they needed to shave off a few more seconds of TV this week. Thankfully, Flair was out there to keep the momentum going after the Freebirds promo. First, he's out there talking about how he spends so much time addressing the fancy cars and the girls and the hotel rooms and Space Mountain that he sometimes forgets that he has to be a professional. And at first I thought, crap. This is going to be a generic Ric Flair promo. Boy, was I swerved. And of course, he's running down Garvin and the Freebirds. He's doing the, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best promos. And then he decided, now you know what? I changed my mind. Let's fucking knock it out of the park. So he then drags Tony over to ringside so he can call over one of the studio fans from the front row. Brings him over. Literally so he could put his arm around his shoulder and ask him, do you want to spend a night with Dark Journey? And after the timid gentleman responds with, yes, sir, I would. Flair just goes, well, too bad, because she's Tully's. And of course, the fans all pop as this poor sap gets shut down. Tony's laughing about it. And then Flair goes into a giant tirade about how the Boston Celtics are down 2-0 in the NBA playoffs, and that Magic Johnson was going to take them to school. And albeit, I don't watch basketball. I've never watched a basketball game in my life. nor do I plan on anytime soon. But Flair cutting the heel promo on the basketball teams and just flipping this entire promo on its head in the last 10 seconds, fucking gold. And of course, Tony's there, not even trying to conceal any of the laughter. He just pitches to commercial and lets the moment speak for itself. For that singular moment of watching the studio fan get put in his place for thinking he stood a chance of getting one night with Dark Journey. And Flair's all like, fuck you, that ain't happening. He didn't even try to make a comeback. He just said, yes, sir. And he went back over to sit right down with all the poor people. And of course, Flair just plays it off perfectly. Did I ever mention how much I love that man? And then once again, they followed that legendary segment with a Barry Windham gladiator squash. It went approximately 30 seconds, and Barry went over with the lariat. For the record, that was Gladiator number 2, not Gladiator number 1, who wrestled in the 6-man tag with the Freebirds. Anyway, I was over that relatively quickly. Then we had Nikita Koloff out of the booth to basically do a minute-long promo on a few heels. He plugged a match between him and Dick Murdoch in Atlanta. Then he called out the Horsemen and basically promised that Lex Luger would go down in defeat the next time he and Nikita stepped in the ring together. Not much else to say about that one. Nor was there much to say about Ron Garvin beating Rick Sullivan. It wasn't even a methodical Ronnie massacre like we're used to seeing. They said, Ronnie, you have 15 seconds, go. And Ronnie came, he went, he threw Sullivan around for like 10 seconds and then won with a knockout punch. By the way, all the segments I've recapped since the Flair promo probably went about a sum total of 15 to 20 seconds. So if it seems like I'm pressing through them in very short order, don't be alarmed. There literally was just nothing to say about virtually any of it. Also, to kind of touch on the subject of the Ronnie Barry thing, that tag team is still a thing. So they made their intentions clear that they are still after the Midnight Express and the U.S. tag titles. But they were also there to inform Cornette that if he tries to stick his nose in their business, they will make sure that they remove him from the equation permanently. Conveniently enough, Ronnie's taking initiative right now by beating up Cornette in cage matches all across the states. Not that they would have an issue putting Cornette out of commission, because we are coming up on the ACL tear number 2, right before the Bash Tour, conveniently enough. And he was not going to be doing a whole lot of traveling, as we came to learn. But we're also not supposed to know that unless we listen to his podcasts. Speaking of injuries, though, not directly related to the ACL tears, Dick Murdoch, he strikes again. And this time it's on UWF television. We are informed that Murdoch attacked Dr. Death Steve Williams with a chair. And this time he went straight for the arm. And, well, we got to see the footage of it. Murdoch stomped on Steve's arm. JR was screaming on commentary to the top of his lungs, just like he was calling a Steve Austin match on WWF Raw in the late 90s. And that was virtually all there was to it. I don't really know what the point of them showing it was, aside from doing it as a courtesy to Bill Watt, since JCP owned the rights to the UWF video library. I think we ended up seeing a bit more of the crossover footage as the territory period kind of winded down, but I don't know. They showed this, and I thought to myself, this is coming off like we need to fill the show with 45 more seconds of content. So, fuck it, let's show a random video clip of Dick Murdoch Pillmanizing a guy's arm. Why not? And well, after the announcers admonished Murdoch for being a terrible person, that brought out JJ and Luger for a brief promo. And while JJ did not have anything of substance to really say, Luger ended up taking control and firing off on Nikita. Obviously, he still wants the U.S. heavyweight title. But while he's talking about the Horsemen being the finest group of athletes in the sport, he then takes Tony over to ringside so they can pan the camera out and get a full view. Not only Luger's upper body in the frame, but the full package, for lack of better terms. He begins flexing and posing as only Luger knew how to do, talking about how Nikita is only chapter 1 in the unprecedented career of Luger. And while he's doing all his double bicep poses and chest flex exercises, they keep putting the camera on girls in the studio to film their reactions, some of whom are smiling and gushing, and others that just look totally disinterested and bored. I couldn't tell which was funnier, but I also couldn't get over the hilarity of Luger cutting the heat promo on Nikita while he's also just casually striking random poses to show off his muscles. There's something that's both off-putting and hysterical about that at the same time. Maybe it's just a simple fact that Luger's promos at this point were still very forced and not very good. But damn it all, you could tell he's trying. He's trying to make some magic happen out there. The Horsemen trying to rub off on him in some way or another. Him and Flair were certainly trying to make magic in that main event. Another rare sighting for Flair working the Saturday Superstation. Teamed up to wrestle Ricky Nelson and I think the guy's name was John Savage. Yet another textbook case of all the job guys to send out there to wrestle Ric Flair, they chose these two guys. I mean, the match only went like, what? Minute and a half? Flair literally hit like 2 moves and one with a figure 4. Luger did the bulk of the work by press slamming the other 2. It was moderately underwhelming per Horseman standards. But it did give us another fine Horseman show-closing promo where they're all at ringside and Tony's there to put over their credentials and, you know, the rest. They're literally the most ineffective set of heels in the history of wrestling. Everybody's cheering them. Everybody's applauding. Everybody's totally babyfacing everything they do. They're not even trying to mask it. And, I mean, in their defense, it's virtually impossible to hate any of them. They're way too damn entertaining to be hated. And God love them. They're just out there having the time of their lives, getting paid to go out there and spitfire a bunch of verbiage and act all crazy. It's definitely one of those things where you can't even compare it to today's wrestling standards because nobody has that kind of passion in their promo work. Certainly not as a collective unit. And, you know, it's kind of unfortunate. You go back and realize the business could never do promo material like this in the modern era. Even the best guys by today's standards, they pale in comparison to the shit these guys were doing back in the day. And it was all natural. All off the cuff. Great stuff, man. Really good stuff. I guess I didn't really have a solid transition for that one. So, abrupt cut it is. World class, let's go. It is certainly world-class television. Certainly by today's standards. All right, so where are we right now with Dallas TV? Well, we're post-David Memorial, and now we're sort of in another one of those weird transition periods. New talent coming on the scene, bit of a shift in overhaul and story development, a lot of feuds being blown off at the Parade of Champions, and now we're kind of resetting everything. exclude the Freebirds versus Von Erichs from the conversation, because that is a program that just continues to go on until the end of time. The experts don't lie when they say that's a feud that carried the entire territory for well over 3 years. Although this week it was a little less Freebird Von Erich central, and those guys were actually kind of split into different interactions on camera. Now, we did get the replay of the main event last week with Kevin and Hayes. They showed about the midway point onward, and they also covered the fallout after the match was over. That was the afterbirth where Killer Khan got involved and injured Kevin by putting the Oriental spike on him. Came up bleeding from the mouth. This is a cool little close to the show. Kevin's blood job kind of looked like he just swallowed a gallon of red wine vinegar and coughed it all up. But it comes from years of seeing guys actually coughing up real blood in wrestling matches on occasion, so you get accustomed to seeing what that looks like if you're paying close attention. But that was pretty much the first quarter of the show, more or less. Another one of those recap segments. I mean, you don't really need to spend a whole lot of time dwelling on it because you can just listen to last week's report. Where we started this week was with what I would like to coin the greatest segment of all time since, well, the last time I coined something the greatest segment of all time. The SmackDown segment with the girls we talked about last week was beyond epic. The Asuka Io Sky Japanese mumbo jumbo was some of the most horribly awkward television I'm probably going to talk about all year. Still hilarious if you remove all the gravity and just watch it in a vacuum for being stupid. This, though, this world-class skit with Bill Mercer trying to interview Stella May French. Oh my God, this segment may have been the best thing I've ever seen. Maybe even better than the girls' skit on SmackDown. Okay, first of all, we were very briefly introduced to the Stella May French personality last week. Personality in air quotes. I mean, I'm hesitant to even call it a gimmick because this woman was so believable in her role, being the stuck-up, button-down, stern auntie of Sunshine. I'm almost convinced this character was just an extension of her own personality. But anyway, she rolls into the frame here in a literal semi-truck. And I'm not talking one of those sissy-ass box trucks like the U-Haul drivers use. This is a big hunker. An 18-wheeler. With the trailer included and everything. I was like, well, of course. That's the exact kind of thing I would have expected this crazy-ass woman to be driving. So it worked. And, well, she gets out of the truck to meet with Mercer and basically go through the timeline of her entire relationship with Sunshine, and Jimmy Garvin for that matter. First, she informs us that her name is Valerie, to which I said, God damn it, woman. We're breaking kayfabe. What are we doing? And once I got past all the fourth wall breaking, she talked about how she raised Sunshine since she was 3 years old, did it as a favor for her sister, talked about how she raised her to be a good girl, more or less. She's on the honor roll, stayed out of trouble, blah, blah. That was until she met that no-good scumbag Jimmy Garvin in college. And as soon as he took her under his wing, bad shit. Been nothing but a horrible influence on her. And she's been hunting down Sunshine for days now. Not been able to locate her, but she wants to ensure Garvin one thing. She has not forgotten about him, and she's still on a mission to get her hands on him. At which point, again, not joking when I say this, she then reaches to the passenger seat to pull out a 2x4. And again, I said, well, of course. You just happen to have those sitting in your passenger seat just in case. And she basically took about 5 minutes to drum up the conclusion that she's going to maim, bludgeon, and bloody up Garvin with this 2x4. She will hunt him down at every venue she goes to, and if he happens to stumble across her in the parking lot, she will be returning the favor in full. And as Bill Mercer closed out the interview in very, very calm delivery, I simply said to myself, so is anyone going to call the authorities? I mean, this woman literally just made a public threat on live television. Were she to show up at the Sportatorium in a fucking semi-truck, don't think it would be that hard to spot her. I'm sure the police would not have an issue in hauling her off. It's pretty obvious spotting if you're being told, you are on the search for a crazy loon bat driving an 18-wheel semi-truck. Keep your eyes peeled. Probably would have taken them all of 2 seconds to find. This was exceptionally horrible. I loved every minute of it. Stella May French, man. 2 weeks she's been on this show. She's already my favorite new talent. And they picked the perfect woman for it. Take one look at her. I don't even think most trained fighters would want to fuck with this woman. And then you put a 2x4 in her hand. Dude, I'm out. I'm not trying to get involved in that. Especially when she's got a semi-wheeler. But, yeah, this is a 5-star segment. And Bill Mercer totally no-selling the threats of violence made it a million times better. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. Stella's going to beat up Jimmy Garvin with a 2x4 and then maybe run him over with a truck? Works for me. Works for me. That was followed with another Chief Jewel Strongbow showcase. This week against the Missing Link. I believe Strongbow's first match upgrade from the regular standard squash. And boy howdy, I could not think of a better opponent to put him in the ring with than whatever in the hell you call this Missing Link persona. Beyond the fact that it's wacky and incredibly awkward to watch. But I guess that's kind of the gimmick. I don't know. Didn't work for me going back and watching all the Mid-South tapes, and doesn't do much for me in Dallas. The Missing Link continues to be one of those gimmicks in wrestling that I never understood, and I don't think I'll ever understand for as long as I continue to be a fan of the sport. And the guy has more bizarre facials and movements than Kenny Omega. Watching him bump and sell is like me watching those videos of dolphins doing flips out of the water. Anyway, the match sucked. Strongbow had a flurry of offense early on where he was doing rapid-fire chops on Link, and Link sold it like he was trying to do like 50 different poses for the cover of Sports Magazine. Link got a little bit of heat on Strongbow until he made the comeback at the end, and well, I don't exactly remember what led to it, but they're in there wrestling, and then Skandar Akbar just decided to get into the ring. And the ref called for the disqualification. Probably because the match was Death TV, so the general just said, nah, fuck this, we're putting a cap on it. That actually would have been great if Akbar just went into business for himself and said, let's finish this thing off before the entire arena tries to light the ring on fire. Good call, sir. And then during the heat beatdown, the Iceman also came out to send the heels packing, so I presume that leads to something. Maybe. I mean, the Iceman's been feuding with Akbar's team since they nailed Jesus to the cross, so at some point you had to figure they might want to move on from it, but no, apparently that feud's going to keep going. So after that, we went back to the ring for a gorgeous Jimmy Garvin squash. this time with Tony Torres. The main thing to note here was Garvin's pre-match interview where he was totally not shitting his pants, looking around for Stella May. Which is hilarious if you think about the idea of Garvin trying to act all courageous and collected. Meanwhile, every few words, he's trying to insinuate that he's fine, and he's like looking over his shoulder, waiting for something to happen. Possibly waiting for some wild woman with a 2x4 to come barreling down the aisleway to take his head off. Mercer called it Garvin being on edge. I called it impending doom. And Garvin knowing damn good and well what was about to come. Match itself, just kind of a standard squash. Went about 5 minutes. Maybe a little under. Garvin won with the brainbuster. And of course, the moment everybody was kind of waiting for, the evident arrival of Mrs. French. And she definitely made her presence known. She hopped the rope, hit the ring, and immediately went after Garvin. Got a few stiff shots to the back before the heels powdered. And while David Manning's trying to get Stella out of the ring, Chris Adams also runs down to try and get cooler heads to prevail. Try as he may, did not really succeed. Stella left the ring with the officer, but it was a little dicey there for a minute. I like when he told her, "You can't come to the ring. You have to settle it in the back." And her response, naturally, is to simply go, "Why?" And albeit, Adams did not really have a good answer. Just kind of gave one of those bullshit parent responses. Because I said so. The kind of response when the kid wants valid explanation for why the parents tell him no and they don't really have a good answer. That was Chris's response. It was a rather underwhelming run-in from Stella May, but at least it didn't involve the 2x4 or the semi-truck. And from there, pretty much sticking with the Adams discussion, he was part of the main event this week, teaming up with the Iceman to wrestle Terry Gordy and Killer Khan in tag team action, playa. A little bit of a different TV main event, and that's perfectly fine. You know, I talked about it earlier. These guys were all kind of mingled in their own separate feuds at the moment, but they just kind of threw them all out there to wrestle this week. Wasn't really anything you were going to remember after it was over, but fine little match. Gordy and the Iceman had some fun spots early on where Gordy was complaining about the Iceman's tape fist. They were doing some ducking and dodging spots early on. Gordy doing his great overselling whenever the Iceman would throw his hands up. There was a little bit of a longer heat session with Gordy and Khan. Kind of split that up between Adams and the Iceman. The early comeback for the Iceman lasted, I believe, all of about 9 seconds before he got cut off. Yeah, it was funny too because Adams tagged him in and Gordy's just kind of standing there waiting for the Iceman to throw a punch. Not even really trying to do anything to defend himself, just letting Parsons go right at him. I was like, dude, fight back. Put your hands up. Don't just stand there stone-faced. Nah, Gordy just took one on the chin. In the literal sense. But now the heels eventually took over again. Worked over the Iceman for a while until Gordy missed an elbow drop and Adams was able to get the hot tag. Gordy took one of the best upside-down flip bumps into the corner buckle. I believe the entire ring shifted about 3 inches. And now the faces are just kind of double-teaming the heels for another minute. And finally, in another one of those popcorn fart DQ finishes, Gordy just casually grabs the Iceman by his neck and throws him over the top rope for the blatant disqualification. And right as the heels try to double-team Adams after the bell, the Iceman runs in with a chair to send the heels running. Kind of all there was to it. Not a bad TV main event, all things considered. Yeah, like I said, none of these guys were really engaged in a deep feud with one another at this point, but it's kind of one of those, we need a TV main event this week, so let's just take a bunch of our top guys and throw them out there. And the combination wasn't bad. It was a fine match. Killer Khan was kind of a non-entity, but, he was harmless enough. He only did a handful of things, and Gordy sort of carried the bulk of the work. Like I noted at the top, though, it's nice to see them deviate from the Freebirds Von Erich stuff occasionally and try to focus on some other content. Killer Khan's a new addition. I don't know. He hasn't been entirely groundbreaking, but I don't know, it gives him some new match ideas to toy with. Like I said, I don't remember much of Killer Khan's run in World Class, so I guess it's just kind of a wait-and-see process with him. Generally, I would say the show is kind of carried by the Stella May French story. Remove her from the equation. This is almost a borderline skippable show. Not a whole lot going on outside a few small story angles, and can't even really call them angles. Garvin getting attacked by Stella May was the main thing people got excited for. I still love that interview, though, where she showed up in the fucking semi-truck. I completely forgot about that little bit. I knew she had a reputation for being a little crazy, but, yeah, the truck threw me for a loop. Now I'm kind of hoping that becomes a recurring theme next time we see her. Every time we see her, I just want her to come barreling down the aisleway with a truck. Anyway, I think we're pretty good to wrap things up here. So back to a normal Monday schedule when we come around this weekend. We'll have Retro Raw, and we'll have whatever horrors await us on the SmackDown show. And the next weekend is going to be a little different because I'm going to check out that Collision debut episode and going to see how that goes. I don't know what my expectations should be, but we will definitely see. In the meantime, while people are running chainsaws outside, I'm going to wrap up this train wreck show and catch you guys on Monday when it's just a wee bit more quiet. God damn it. My neighbors are crazy. Maybe that's Stella May French out there. Who knows? Anyway, take care all. Peace out.